Research shows that aligning company and personal purpose improves productivity, retention, and overall wellness in the workplace. And our guest has humanized and gamified the purpose discovery process for both the company and the worker with a SaaS platform that includes on demand videos, self guided exercises, and behavioral assessments to build a purpose centered culture. Come on, founders. You know, talent acquisition is one of the hardest things you have to do, but the most important thing you have to do. You are going to love this delicious conversation with an amazing serial founder. Stay tuned for the Startup Life live show. Let's glow, everyone. Hello and welcome to the Startup Life Live Show. I'm your host, Ande, Lyons, 4 times founder and startup champion to founders around the world. And after raising 4 businesses of my own, I have a deep appreciation, founders, of what you are navigating every single day. One minute you're popping that champagne bottle going, woohoo, and the next minute you're crying into it because of course, something has happened. That's the journey of the entrepreneur and especially the newly minted founder. And that's why I'm so grateful that you carved out time in your very busy focus schedule to tune into the Startup Life live show, because as you do better, your startup is going to do better. And I guarantee you are going to grab some amazing nuggets from our conversation today. A big mwah and yoo-hoo to the live viewers, replay viewers, and podcast listeners. I'm so grateful that you are here and tuning in. And just a little housekeeping, if I may be so bold. If you're tuning in from YouTube, please click on that subscribe button, because this is a great way for you to stay up at what's happening here, but also for us to reach more folks, because this show is all about maximizing the joy and minimizing the heartache of founders' journeys. And how do you get and know who my next guest is going to be? You hop on over to the Startup Life Live Meetup group. And that way you'll get a deep dive whenever I post a new show. I'm here Tuesdays and Fridays at 12 p.m. ET most times. And this will tell you who I'm diving into and also the brilliance that they could end up bringing for you and your startup. I just have a little Andy-licious advice I'm going to share. But first, I want everybody to know about this amazing event coming up. I attended WoCon last year, and I have to tell you, I met so many wonderful people. I've had a few of the speakers on the show, and even the founder of WoCon has been on the show. So I got to tell you, this is a phenomenal summit. And it convenes for investors, allies, and policymakers who want to deepen their understanding of the problems with the system that continues to keep women of color entrepreneurs locked out. And the summit will share stories about the unique entrepreneurial journey of women of color, facilitate honest conversations about allyship, and propose solutions that can lead to systemic change. And you know how important this is, and this is how we make changes happen. Use the code WOC STARTUP startup when you register. Visit WOCCON.org/summit. Get registered. You are going to really love the conversations, and it's several days, so links are in the show notes as well. Okay, folks, I hope you can join us. And I always love to share a little Andy-licious advice before we go into our conversation. And today I'm going to talk about, focusing on direction versus speed. Founders, the last thing you want to have happen is to be speeding down the startup road going in the wrong direction. I laugh because, yes, I've been there. So I know you feel the pressure to vroom, but please take the time to focus on the direction you want to be going in, which isn't always clear. Am I right? Yeah, sometimes you have to be flexible and be ready to pivot. So I invite you to please do the research, get the customer and user experience feedback you need and look at that data and take your time, because this will determine the best direction for you to go in. And remember, you are not in competition with anyone else. You have your own timeline for you and your business. So practice patience, be flexible to pivots, and persevere. Okay, good. Little Andy-licious advice for you to hold on to as you're building your beautiful business. So now I get to introduce you to our wonderful guest. It's the amazing Greg Sloan, and he's the Chief Purpose Officer and co-founder of Go Beyond, a talent development company that leverages behavioral science and technology to help companies attract, engage, and grow their people. And with over 25 years of experience in financial services, Greg is a serial founder who discovered the benefits of activating personal purpose in the workplace and loves sharing this knowledge with other leaders. I'm so excited to introduce you to this phenomenal founder, Greg Sloan. Welcome to the Startup Life Live Show.
Ande, it is wonderful to be here. I love your energy. I'm hoping it just comes off on me.
And right back at you, Mr. Slav, because we know that you have the vibe that everybody wants to be around, and it's so much fun. Let's just say hello to a few folks who are stopping by to say hello and share their love. John of Arc, waving madly to you. Thank you. He says, here to watch the amazing Greg Sloan. So happy that you're here. And hey, Ruth, this is our community manager. She meets and greets everybody on the platforms and makes them feel
Wonderful.
welcome. I'm happy you're here. Peter, across the pond in Old London. I am thrilled that you're here. Thank you. Thank you for stopping by. And did I miss Rebecca Moore? I know that Ruth is saying hello to Rebecca Moore, but I don't see her in the comment threads. But Rebecca, if you're tuning in, so happy. Everybody knows how much I love Rebecca Moore's in a nutshell consulting business. She really rocks it for female founders. Unbelievable.
That's great.
Greg, where are you sitting right now?
I am in my home office in Atlanta, Georgia. We live just north of the city and in a wonderful townhouse.
Excellent. I always like to know, and folks, pop in. You saw Peter. He shared that he's from Old London. Please let us know where you're hailing from today in the comment threads as well. And do not hesitate. And I'm very serious about this, folks, to ask questions. Okay. Pop your questions and comments into the comment threads during our conversation. We'll put them up on the screen so we can all learn together. Okay. And if you do have a startup that you'd like to amplify, put the URL, name, and one-liner into the comment threads, and Greg and I we'll just cheer you wildly. Okay. And you
I need
never
a clapper.
know. Right. And you never know who's going to tune in down the road, right? I get thousands of replays on the videos and hundreds of downloads on the podcast. So amplify that business.
That's awesome.
Put me to work here, folks.
There you go.
So, and a quick hello to a few more folks before we get going. Hey, Brent Manuel. So, Greg, you've got to follow Brent on Twitter. He is an incredible, diverse founder who also really amplifies and helps people stay aware that folks who are disabled, those with visible and invisible disabilities, deserve a seat at the table. And he's out there making sure that it's getting out in the world. And yes, we're going to celebrate his web accessibility consulting business. So yay. And hello, Kristen Collins. Nice to meet you. So thrilled that you're here. Greg Sloan is amazing, has mentored and guided my purpose journey for half a decade. I love that.
Yes, she's amazing.
Oh my gosh. Where are you from, Kristen? Let us know. Anyway, let's get a little bit of a background from Greg and find out what prompted you, because this was back in 2007, I believe, when you first became an entrepreneur. How did this happen? Because, why leave a paycheck behind? Why take on the risk and high uncertainty, right? Did you have role models growing up? Were you hustling already in elementary school and felt very confident about moving product and services in life? How did you fall into entrepreneurship?
Boy, well, thank you. So I wish I had those hustling middle school stories, but I would say I really trace my entrepreneurial spirits to my grandfather, who I spent summers with as a middle schooler, and he was blind. He went blind in his late 40s. And I spent summers with him raking leaves and mowing his lawn. I got $5 a day to do the thing that I hated, so I could spend time with him to do the things that I loved. And that was to get into his garage and pull out all of his tools and really help him build stuff and fix cars. Um, one day I remember clearly the story. He picked up a cotter pin, if you're familiar with that. It's a little device that kind of holds a wheel to an axle. And he said, "Greg, invent the cotter pin." And that was sort of his seed planting in my mind to do something creative that's going to change the world, that everyone is going to recognize that you brought this thing into the world. And I would say that was really what planted the seed of entrepreneurship in me. And I don't know, 10, 11, 12 years old. So 2007 was not my first launch. I would say it was my first successful launch. I had 3 or 4 failures before that.
Oh, wonderful. And I always say, folks, you know how I feel about those fails.
Oh, yeah. Fail forward.
Fail forward. Failures inform you of what works and doesn't work for you or for a business. And you all know how I really feel about entrepreneurship, which is you always win when you launch a business, no matter what happens. Right,
absolutely,
Greg?
Absolutely.
Always. So you went into financial services. What was it that lit your heart up about the financial world?
So I grew up in Hawaii, as I may have mentioned, and my father was a disabled veteran. He was disabled the year before I was born. I was born in 1969. He was disabled in 1968. So I didn't know anything different. And Canada, we grew up poor. So for me, money was always something that we didn't have a lot of. And it was something that I sort of set as the pinnacle of my personal purpose at that point in time, was to make a lot of money and to provide for my family, because I was raised by a father who wasn't able to do that. So the story behind financial services is actually interesting. I was working in retail here in Atlanta, Georgia in 1990, 1991 maybe, and I was offered a 401k. And I took this 401k statement. I called a friend of my father-in-law's and I said, I don't know what to do with this thing. It looks really cool. It says I can invest. And I said, if I buy you lunch, will you help me navigate this? And we went to lunch and he talked about helping people with financial goals. And I said, forget the 401k. How do I do what you do? Because that is what I'm more interested in. So I was in college at the time. I pivoted from a management degree to a finance degree, graduated in 1995. And my father-in-law actually got sick and died while I was in school. But during that period of time, he actually handed over his financial affairs to me. He was a physician, so he had some means. And he was essentially my first client. So by the time I graduated, I had already had this experience of helping someone, a family member, make financial decisions. And so it was a natural progression for me to get into financial services. And that was in 1995.
And you were very successful by the measurements of what you earned, how well you did your work, how successful you helped others, right?
Yeah, so I became a certified financial planner, went back and got my MBA. I started my career with Prudential and eventually moved to a company that became part of Goldman Sachs. And that was really where I became financially successful, professionally successful, if you want to use that as a metric. And we served corporate C-suite executives as their personal CFO. And so I became one of those individuals that was serving very high-powered C-suite executives. I had a client who was a CEO of a Fortune 100 company, which means there's only 100 of those. And so I really found financial success while the rest of my life was going in the wrong direction.
And I bring that up, of course, because folks, you can be really good at something and you can be really successful at something and be absolutely miserable. And that's why the topic today is about activating purpose, right? Being on purpose gives you the juice to get out of bed with a spring in your step, but it takes some self-discovery. And so, Greg, you had to do that inner work, and you had a moment in your life. You talk about in your notes that 37, you were feeling like something is missing here. Talk a little bit about how you dove into that personal growth and discovery and what you learned about yourself and how it informed you for moving forward.
Yes. So always remember, I'm a finance guy, undergrad in finance, master's degree in finance. If you couldn't say it in a spreadsheet or an algorithm, then it probably wasn't worth saying. All those psychology books that I was forced to read in college, I didn't have much value for them until I got to this point in my life and realized I had checked off a lot of the goals, the financial goals in my life, but something was missing. I was obese. My marriage was on the rocks. I didn't have much of a relationship with my children. So I started going through my own personal purpose journey, read psychology books, did personality assessments, and it culminated in the weekend trip with my wife to the mountains of North Georgia. And we said, look, we're going to spend 2 days and we're not coming back until we figure out, like, why are we here? And what is it that we're supposed to do that's going to move us from miserable, financially successful, but miserable, to something that, God willing, is both financially successful and fulfilling, which I would say is, wealthfully. And so we left that weekend really understanding more about our purpose. So it was a lot of definite self-discovery, self-awareness, and really understanding what is our identity, what is it that we would describe about ourselves, and then how do we put that into words, a personal purpose.
Right.
Which we define as sort of the best definition of the best version of you.
I love that. And that has become your North Star today, right?
It has, absolutely. We love that phrase, North Star, true north. It's that thing that's Dr. Judith Wright, who runs a psychology program up in Chicago, describes our purpose, or your North Star, as sort of like the flight plan of an airplane. You create it, you set it out before your departure, but you never really stay on course. The winds, the change in the schedule will cause your plane to move a little off flight plan. But I think of your purpose more as the guardrails, that once you go past a certain point, you recognize, you know what, I've got to redirect back to this North Star direction.
That's right. And so and folks, you may have heard this before already, but you have your North Star, but sometimes, how you get to that North Star is going to change. And it's the same thing with your business and your startup, that that this is the outcome that you're going to do, and you pull on threads along the way. Same with, your purpose. And sometimes that thread has a period, a chapter or two. Sometimes that thread is going to get you all the way to the North Star. But for you to stay aware is what's so important, right, Greg?
Absolutely.
I love that. I'm going to just say hello to Julia. Hi, Julia. So happy you're tuning in. She's saying hello. And Julia, just so you know, when I started off the show, I did a wonderful promo, and I'll put it out there again for the WOCON 23 Summit, March 7th to 9th. Use code WOC Startup when you register. So many great stories that will help amplify women of color. And you can be allies, folks. And that's just as important for our white-skinned folks to remember that you are here to be allies and sometimes even accomplices, right? To helping our women of color get the funding they need, get the introductions, the building, the social capital, etc. So please register for WOCON 23. All the links will be in the show notes. So, Greg, you found your North Star, you found your purpose, and now you've tested the waters. Oh, I have to find out, did the marriage last?
Oh, yeah. So we are celebrating our 30th anniversary this June. We have 3 purpose-centered adult children, 27, 25, 23, and we have a blessed life.
Thank you for doing the work to stay together. Yeah, my darling man and I are celebrating our 35th with children the similar ages. And I have to tell you, we've done the work. As some good friends know, we even had like the therapist come in and live with us for a few days after our .com went under. But, whatever it takes, I am so happy for you. And here she is, the goddess, Catherine Sloan.
She is.
Hey, and Catherine, to the artwork that we're going to be sharing for Go Beyond. Outstanding. And here's Kristen saying Catherine Sloan is equally as awesome. Yay. I love that. And Ruth is saying congratulations. And Mia Voss is hello and yes to being allies and accomplices. And congrats on purpose-centered adult children. I love that. And everybody, you know what happens when Mia Voss is in the room. We always do a quick shout out to her podcast, Shit We Don't Talk About with Mia Voss. Go check it out. Follow her on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts, because Mia, as we call her in our household, the voice, has the most incredible ability and way about her in getting these tough conversations out to the
I
world.
love
So
it. I love it.
isn't that great? Yeah. So, Greg, let's talk a little bit about how you came to where you are today, because you had a few oopsies and a few, startups that evolved, and then you finally had your first successful one in 2007. Can we talk just a little bit about the learnings from these businesses that you've had? Because we have a lot of newbie founders that tune in who often think that what's going on for them as a founder is the first time it's ever happened to anyone. And we want to make sure they all feel nice and at home here at the Startup Live show, and that they are not the only ones.
I was thinking about how old I was for my first startup ever, first company. And it was probably age 24. It was right when I was in school. This is when cell phones just came out, and you didn't buy cell phones, you leased cell phones.
Oh my
And I
gosh,
actually
that's
opened up
right.
a little cell phone leasing agency, if you will. It didn't last, I think, less than 6 months. But it was called Coconut Wireless. And for anybody growing up in Hawaii, Coconut Wireless is sort of what we use to describe, I heard it through the grapevine.
Grapevine, yep.
So it was a great classic brand. But anyway, it lasted 6 months. I did a few more, not only when I was at Prudential, but also when I was at Goldman Sachs on the side. I think I counted 4 failures before I launched Daniel Advisors in 2007.
Hey, can we
And,
just give
yeah.
everybody, give Greg a cheer? Come on. This is just so important. You always win when you launch a business, no matter what happens. So I am so proud of you.
I loved my MBA. I thought the program to go to school and really understand application versus just theory, I loved it. Having said that, as they say today, launching a business, you'll get an MBA. And so maybe I got 4 or 5 along the way with all the failures that I did. But at the end of the day, obviously business is about people and process and product. I tend to focus a little more on people today. Obviously, you have to have something that the market wants, but when you bring the right people together, what we would say people of purpose, and you have a direction that you're going towards, you will eventually figure it out if you stick together and you really are aligned in what you're trying to do to change the world. And, we think business should be and can be a force for good. That's a little bit of our definition around business purpose. But at the end of the day, some of those decisions that were integral to my story is part of the reason why we are so passionate about Go Beyond and helping other companies make sure that they're aligned with their people. So Daniel was started in 2007.
How'd you come up with the name Daniel?
Oh, so great question. I did not want to use my last name. It was, I guess, forward thinking enough to realize that if you use your personal name, you do create some barriers around your business for growth. Having said that, people remember names. It's an easy thing to remember. And I was meeting with my lawyer this particular Monday. It was a Friday afternoon. I did not have a name. Horizon, Compass, all of the traditional Lighthouse. Didn't want to use any of these. My wife, we had started attending a new church, and my wife said that the pastor wanted us to read from a particular scripture in the Old Testament from the book of Daniel. And the scripture referenced Daniel, who was a character who essentially served as a personal CFO to a Babylonian king. And it was said of him that he was not corrupt, he was trustworthy, and he was not negligent. And I thought, gosh, if you're going to hire a financial personal advisor, who do you want? Trustworthy, not negligent, not corrupt. The negligent part, making mistakes is par for the course. But anyway, that's how the name got chosen. It was really more around the characteristics or the core values, if you will, of the person, because we wanted not just for me to exemplify those characteristics, but the advisors that we hired in our firm to be considered Daniel Advisors.
Excellent. And so what happened to Daniel Advisors?
So 2009, 10, we survived the financial crisis. Launching a wealth management firm right before the world falls apart is not for the faint of heart. Started integrating purpose in 2010 with my clients because I saw that they were struggling with some of the same things I were. Started integrating purpose into hiring people in 2012, 2013. Got to 2015, businesses had grown, stabilized by that point in time. And I knew and saw that I was, I guess, 45 years old at the time and felt like I had about 10 years left that I wanted to stay within the wealth management industry. So I started to put together an exit plan in 2015, eventually sold the company in 2020.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Seriously. And folks, take that in. You had an idea that you wanted an off-ramp, which is wonderful.
Yep.
But founders, I really encourage you to take a moment and think about, what is that number? What does an exit strategy look like? How did you work that process, Greg? Because I feel so strongly that founders need to keep that just sort of parked on the shelf somewhere, because someone may come by and have a number and make an offer to you, founders, and you've got to know, does it fall within your quote exit strategy? The sad things I've seen many, many times over the last 30 years are founders who did not do this, and their board as well were all into having a certain number for sale. And then boom, things happened and they sold for assets and liabilities. That's it. So you don't want that to happen. What are your thoughts, Greg?
Yeah, no question. The other thing I remind you is that having a number is only part of the story, because many of the buyers are going to also want you to remain with the exit for a post-exit, post-transition. So in 2015, look, everyone's baby is beautiful, right? And what you really need is to have someone else to evaluate your baby. So in 2015, I actually did that. I went out and hired a firm to look at my company from an objective perspective to say, what does this look like as a standalone? Is it marketable? Does it have value in the marketplace as a standalone entity? And the report card I got back was probably something similar to a C+. And it said, essentially, it's not worth as much as you think it might be worth. And so I was given a little playbook to say, get your house in order, which candidly took about 3 years to do. So it really wasn't a viable, sellable asset until about 2018. And then I started really getting into conversations. Again, my plan was to stay until age 55. So I figured that I had about 5 years post sale. It didn't turn out that way. It actually turned out for the better. But nonetheless, look, I tell people today, launching a business is hard. Growing a business is hard. Selling a business is hard. It's all hard. So pick your heart and recognize that there are going to be challenges along the way.
Oh my gosh. Well, first I'm having an Andy-licious moment, everyone. Because of that exit strategy, advice is double chef's kiss. Okay. Everyone, please take notes, take that in, etc. But also, we have a great stitch that on a pillow moment, don't we, everyone? So let's do a little clap on that. Because startup life is hard. As Greg just said, when you launch, it's hard. As you build it, it's harder. When you sell it, it's all hard.
And real quickly for a moment on the metrics, I did triple the value of the business from 2015 to 2020. So going through that process does produce financial results when you really understand what is a buyer looking at, not what do you as an owner look like. We had to change the cloud. We had to revamp our technology systems. We had to get systems and processes in place that didn't exist in 2015. So there's all kinds of things you have to do to go through that exit. I now help other companies do that myself.
Okay. And folks, I'll have a link in the show notes if you want to have a conversation with Greg about that separately. But let's talk about Go Beyond, because now you've sold your business. Something lit you up. Something compelled you to pick a new hard,
Mhm.
as Ruth is
Maybe a harder hard.
harder hard. But what compelled you to launch Go Beyond? Why was it important to you to help companies build a purpose-centered culture, and for the worker, the team coming on board to feel purpose-centered?
So I'll go back again. Daniel started with a purpose.
Yeah.
So I didn't know what it was like to start a company without that true north. What I did not appreciate was that my employees and my workers also wanted their purpose aligned to the company purpose. I went through that turnstile of continuing to lose. Most of my employees at that point were millennials,
Yeah.
and they would stay with me for 12 to 24 months and then would leave because I didn't really appreciate their personal purpose until I did. So I was using this process internally within my organization. I did not know it had value outside of my organization. That inspiration actually came from my son, who was going off to school to be an engineer. And he said, Dad, I think this process that you've developed to help individuals and help companies really articulate and activate purpose to align themselves, I think you can build software and technology around it. And I said to him, well, what do I know about building technology? I'm a service provider. And he said, well, I'm an engineer. I think we can do this. So I have to credit Jonathan as the inspiration behind taking a process and turning it into technology. And so we started dipping our toe in the water in 2017, well before I was ready to exit, just to understand what does it take to what does it look like to take a process and build technology around a process? That has been 2 MBAs.
I can only imagine. But let me bring up some artwork here so we can start really formulating what Go Beyond does and understanding the parts and pieces and how you really serve and humanize the process of talent acquisition plus culture. Making sure, folks, that all that time you spend on onboarding someone helps them and helps you, because when the team is happy, the customers are happy, and the revenue stream will have a much better outcome as a result. So please talk about this slide right here.
Yeah. So when we begin an engagement, we always want to start at the attraction and the alignment phase, which really we think of as a brand. So do you have a brand that is attractive to the ideal workforce that you're trying to attract? Most companies today, millennials are the largest workforce in terms of demographics, and most companies are out trying to attract the millennial workforce. Gallup did work pre-pandemic that the summary that Jim Clifton wrote in the title was, companies have to pivot from paycheck to purpose. I think it was better.
I just want to take that. Yeah, I just want to take that in for a second. And folks, when I was earning my MBA way back in the day in '89, I remember the deans of my school talking to us about how in the 21st century, it was going to be about purpose and about trust. When you onboarded people, it will no longer be the greed of the 80s and 90s, which was the paycheck and stock options.
Well, and the pension plan, right?
And the pension plan, yeah.
That was that we grew up in an era where companies work for a company for 30 years, you got the gold watch, you got the pension plan, whatever it is. That doesn't exist anymore. Workers today really do have the freedom to move.
That's right. And so the slide that I have up for my podcast listeners is, it says, changing the world for the better together, attract more, engage better, grow together. And it's showing this align, which is purpose branding, cultivate purpose in action, and activate purpose pulse. What slide should I go to next? Because I have this wonderful.
So when we talk about, let me kind of give you the backdrop for the program that we deliver before we get to purpose pulse. So really what we're delivering is a way for companies to first create their purpose statement and their purpose, their true north, if you will. A 2022 CEO purpose report was just released a few weeks ago. 28% of CEOs have already created and crafted a purpose statement for their organization. 55% of CEOs have not, but they want to. I guess 17% were not necessarily
Oh
interested in
my
it.
gosh, who knew?
Exactly. So
Those are
think
big
about that. What
numbers.
you're saying is that leaders at the very highest level, I'm going to give you one more statistic that comes in from the pandemic. 62% are saying that they are accelerating their whole structure around purpose due to COVID-19. Okay.
Okay, so let's identify purpose for a second. Let's really define what that means, because being on purpose can mean you're fulfilling a part of yourself that's really important to you, that leaves you feeling fully expressed in your highest version as a person. Well, that could be an opera singer, that could be a chef. I mean, where does the word purpose and how do you define it for the workplace?
Yeah. Okay. So when we use the word purpose, we really are using it between two audiences. So
Okay.
we'll talk about the first, which is the company purpose.
Mhm.
And our definition might be there. Every company can be a force for good. The difference between a mission and a purpose, I would say a mission is a little more directed towards the customers and the shareholders, maybe the board of directors. You're going to read that in every annual statement, the
Right.
mission statement at the beginning. Whereas a purpose statement is much more appealing and attracted to your workforce and maybe even the community at large. I happened to was going through a website of a private equity firm in Chicago, $9.5 billion under management. They describe their firm as the next generation of private equity that serves at the integration of purpose and profits. Now, if there's any type of organization and institution that doesn't seem as purpose centered, you might think it's in the world of high finance. But this is an organization that is buying up other and providing capital for other large enterprise acquisitions. And what they're saying is that we cannot just be about profit.
Right.
Even our portfolio companies have to stand for something bigger. I'll tell you a wonderful story that I heard a few years ago from the CEO of UPS, Carol Tomei. She was the commencement speaker at my youngest son's graduation. In 2020, she was appointed as the CEO about 3 months before COVID hit. And one of the first things Miss Tomei did was come into the organization and say, we have this great mission, but we as an organization don't have a purpose, that we stand for something greater. And so she commissioned a team within her organization. I don't know exactly how she did it, but she told the story. And they pulled this team together to craft a very simple, compelling purpose statement for the company. If you go to UPS's website, they now have it as a separate page. There is a video. It very much is about UPS as a community and what you're doing to help. I believe this purpose is to move the world forward by delivering what matters.
Okay, nice tagline.
It's great. And so when I think of, well, who's the audience? It's the audience that audience is not necessarily the shareholder, right?
Oh, thank God. I'm sorry, this whole purpose, having purpose within an organization really is a gift to capitalism, because capitalism is off the rails right now. And it does my heart good to hear that these large corporations, Fortune 5,000, 1,000, 500, 100, are looking at purpose as being part of the mission and understanding that purpose is the team internally. The folks who are delivering need to feel on purpose so that the customer can have a sense of that purpose.
I'll
Yes?
give you another statistic coming out of this report. 57% of CEOs believe that employees are more valuable long run to their organization than shareholders.
Okay. All right, everybody, take that in, because if you're following the world and all the shenanigans going on, you sometimes think like we have no hope with our highly capitalistic society here in the US. It is the land of opportunity, and I'm seeing a shift. Is that what you're saying, Greg, through the data, that the leaders in these companies who set the tone, doesn't mean it always trickles down as well as we'd like to see, are committed to being on purpose and having a purpose-centered culture?
Uh, so I take a position that we're sort of in the third wave or we're in the third act of this 4-part drama. And the first act occurred after 9/11, where we all learned in a moment's notice that you could lose your life just by going to work.
Yep.
The second act was the crisis of 2008, where we lost faith in our great leaders, particularly in the financial system.
Yep.
I believe the third act began before the pandemic. The wave was already building. If you look at some of the data that started in 2016 when LinkedIn and did their global purpose index. So COVID, I think of as sort of the straw that broke the camel's back. So now we as a society are recognizing that when we spend our time and energy doing something for a very long period of time, we want to make sure we're compensated more than, or the compensation goes beyond just the paycheck. And that really is for ourselves to really leave the world a better place for others.
Go beyond just the paycheck and the 401ks, people. And ideally, the medical insurance, right? The healthcare benefits. I'm feeling more hopeful than I have in a long time based on the data, Greg. So I want to personally say thank you for sharing that. So let's get back to how you help folks on board. And I know, for those who are tuning in right now, please go check out gobeyond.work, changing the world for the better. Visit and select, and I have a link right here, and Ruth is putting it into the show notes for the live viewers, but I'll have it in the show notes as well for those watching the replay and listening to the podcast. There's a link there, and you're going to select, try it for yourself, and receive 15% off when using promo code Ande15, everyone. Okay, this is an awesome opportunity, and now we all understand what go beyond means. So thank you, Greg. So what slide shall I put up next so that we can dive deeper in how you help? Because I want to just say quickly to founders, you're in the startup stage, okay? You're running really quickly, but you have to be thinking about culture every single day. It's not just about what the tech or products and services. You have to be thinking about your team and your culture, especially because then you're going to go this up like this, and you're going to rise into that curve called enterprise, which means you have to have a system in place. Okay, right. So to make it easy. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, so we help companies integrate purpose into their culture and strategy. Culture is around their people, and strategy is around how you make business decisions. So as we've described what UPS does to help them. By the way, 73% of CEOs say that purpose is that North Star that really helps them make those long-term business decisions. But in terms of onboarding, when you move from the strategy of the business to the culture of the people, what we provide is software as well as on-demand videos and exercises to integrate purpose and to essentially build that purpose-centered culture within your team. We did launch more as an SMB product, then we pivoted to enterprise, and we've now brought back a program that is for startups as small as 5. This is a community-based tool, so probably doesn't work quite as well with 1 or 2 individuals. You do want other.
But 5, that's many startups have used 5.
Absolutely. So when we talk about building a purpose-centered culture, we provide you tools. What is tools? Software exercises as well as on-demand video exercises.
Is this the right slide for this?
Actually, just go back to the one with the 3. This one here. So that's the cultivate, what we call purpose in action. Now the purpose pulse, you can move to the next slide. This is how we measure whether it's working. So anytime you do something, I think it was Peter Drucker who said, if you can measure it, you can manage it.
Yes.
So what we want to do is we want to measure how is this working within your organizations. We work with a PhD to pull together measurement, key statistics and things that we wanted to measure with respect to well-being in your organization. And these are the 6 things that we felt were common across all. Stress response. How do you deal with that productive and unproductive stress? Energy efficiency. Is this aligned with your life? Is your work in alignment? Are you personally fulfilled? Are you going to make a lasting impact? So Purpose Pulse is a very, very simple tool. You can do it on your phone. You can do it on your desktop. It takes about 12 minutes. And this is where you essentially step on the scale. If you were to start a diet program or a weight loss program or anything, you first want to measure, where am I today? Mm-hmm. So when we went out to organizations a few years ago and talked about how we can integrate purpose into their culture, some of those leaders said to us, great, we love it. How do we know it works? And we said, simple, measure them before, measure them after. And they said, we don't know how to do that. And so we went looking for a tool, couldn't find one, decided to build one ourselves. And that's where Purpose Pulse comes in. It's a tool to help you check the pulse of your people as often as you feel it's necessary.
This is wonderful. And for those who are listening on the podcast, there's a great slide up here, which is about measuring the 6 factors to improve well-being, and measure being the key word here. Stress response, energy efficiency, life alignment, work alignment, personal fulfillment, lasting impact. And you can find this as well by visiting gobeyond.work/solutions/purpose-pulse. Link will be in the show notes. Select try it for yourself and receive 15% off when using promo code Ande15. This is really powerful, especially the measure part, in my humble opinion. And did Jonathan help you figure this out for the SaaS? Because technology is so important, and having the ability for folks to take the pulse like this. How did you figure out that tech component? Did you have to outsource, or was it your son, John? Like, how did that work out?
So failure. I don't know how many failures we went through in terms of the technology. We outsourced to this country. We outsourced to that country. We brought it back to the United States twice. And we kept failing forward. Yes, Jonathan, I believe Jonathan ultimately built the first workable version of Purpose.
Right, a good MVP. Yeah.
And so we're at version 2.0 now, which is even better than 2.1, 1.0. But at the end of the day, I want to give a shout out a little bit to my wife here, because she was integral in this particular tool. So when we talk about purpose, we also talk about personal purpose. And my wife's personal purpose is to measure truth to promote well-being. Measure truth to promote well-being. She has her heart and soul in this particular tool, Purpose Pulse, because it really is about a measurement of your well-being of your people. We are blessed to be launching with a healthcare organization, and this one's really hits us close to home, with a healthcare organization that is trying to solve the burnout crisis in the nursing workforce.
Oh my gosh.
And so we are early stage in there. Our tool will be used as the WellBeing Assessment, and we're so excited about being able to really help nurses across the country. We all need this.
Greg, I was just sitting beside the founder of UberDocs, she told me the reduction in the workforce in the medical field, doctors and nurses, is huge. They're leaving in droves due to this burnout.
We as society shouldn't stand for this, but even as individuals and patients, every single one of us has someone that is being impacted. My mother is staying with us right now. She's about to turn 80 years old. She fell and broke her wrist. She is currently being served by nurses and physical therapists. We need those workers in those roles, or else we don't live the fulfilled lives that we want to.
That's right. Quick shout out to Peter. He's asking how to get a slide set.
Catherine at gobeyond.work. She's
Excellent.
Probably going to get inundated.
There we go. Perfect. And Mia saying, wow, Purpose Pulse, and right and measurable is sovereign. Absolutely, Mia, 100%. Yeah, see, this is where this purpose business, folks, really hits the rubber. It helps people feel so acknowledged and appreciated, and knowing that the company cares about how they feel and how they execute and implement within the workforce, and how they're managing all the different stresses in their life. Go ahead, Greg.
Well, I want to say one thing about the Purpose Pulse, just for listeners, because this is really important. When we provide this to an organization, the employer, the sponsoring company, does not get the individual results. Only the individual gets the individual results.
That was my next question, Greg. The privacy, because people aren't going to tell you anything. So how do you protect that privacy?
Yeah, so we outsource some of the back end cloud solutions.
Mm-hmm.
The company only gets the aggregate report. So the data comes back to us. We put together an aggregate report and we send it out to the sponsoring company. Of course, they get to know how many people took the assessment, and then they get the aggregate results of the assessment. And
Excellent.
again, what we're trying to do here is to give companies the data, the real data, to say, where are my people not well? Because a lot of organizations are investing time and resources. I'll give you one example. Is we measured something called financial satisfaction. Over the last few years, companies are throwing money at employees to try to make sure they stay. And I'm very aware of several situations where the millennial workforce is receiving those pay increases, and all it's doing is kicking the can down the road because they're going to leave eventually. They want something else, but they'll take that additional pay increase. Companies that are smart and can use our tool will realize that sometimes financial satisfaction, they're already scoring high. You should be investing your resources in other areas that may even cost less than giving everyone a across the board pay increase. I can't remember which organization it was. It might have been KPMG or PwC that did 3 pay increases across the board in 1 year just to retain workers.
Wow. And folks, it's not enough.
Mm.
People, after a while, yes, the money is taking care of certain needs, and maybe they've got a big mortgage now or want to join that country club, but they will dump that. And we know, going down to the Z generation, they just don't have those needs. They got a working phone, right? And internet access, and they're happy.
It is. And in fact, I'm pretty sure this was Better Up that did this study, that millennials will take up to a 23% pay cut if the work that they're doing is more meaningful to them. That's not a license to pay less. What you're basically saying is, look, compensate me in other ways than just a W-2.
Right. Compensate me in other ways. I've got to write that down and use that. That's phenomenal quote right there. And I just want to say right here, I'm getting out the maracas, folks, because maracas, thank you for the data. Every time you keep laying down the hard research numbers. This is not, made up alternative facts here, folks. This is the real deal. And the numbers do not lie. If you choose to look at the truth, they do not lie. Tell us a little bit about this slide about the purpose pulse, because I love this. It's all about measure the 6 factors to improve well-being, but this is HRX, human resources by prescription, well-being tools for your organization. Talk a little bit about this wheel. We're looking at a wheel, podcast listeners. Talk about this wheel.
Yeah,
Greg.
so this goes back a few years when we first started building this tool. Again, this was feedback from some of our early customers, not necessarily something we came up with, which was, we don't know what is driving these disengagement, turnover, and burnout issues. So what we want was to give companies and organizations a diagnostic tool, and that's where Purpose Pulse was really born, because a lot of organizations are designing plans, wellness plans, but they really don't know if those wellness plans are being designed for the aggregate of society or for their particular organization, or maybe even for their particular team. We've talked to large enough organizations to realize that they can actually customize their particular solution set around their leader, if you will, because a lot of these organizations have business units that, there's 400 or 500 people that all roll up to one particular leader. Well, that particular leader might have a style that the solution set is a little different, let's say, than another leader. So this really was supposed to provide the tools that they could design.
Yeah, and for listeners, it's a wheel. So at the top, it's all about diagnose the causes of disengagement, turnover, and burnout. So at the top, we have diagnosis, the condition, and then you move to the right, design the plan, and you move down to the bottom of the circle, the clock, develop the wellness, And then the most important part at the end of the circle is drive mission. Now, do the folks stumble at that stage? How do you make sure that they're going to drive that purpose mission home?
Well, again, it's going to start with the leadership, right?
Yeah.
Is the leadership committed? Unilever is a great case study, by the way. They started talking about this in 2009.
Nice.
Unilever started
Unilever.
integrating purpose. As I understand the research, they first rolled it out to all of their leaders, 400 and some odd brand leaders. Then it went so well, they decided to roll their program out to 150,000 worldwide workers. Last I read, about 60% had gone through their particular program. Now that one is definitely based on a mission by mission, and when we say mission in that organization and in many others, it's by the business unit. So Unilever is a conglomerate of brands. Ben & Jerry ice creams has a mission.
Well, and when you start rewarding these managers, because everybody who's worked in a large corporation knows that, the leadership can go, but down below, nobody's implementing. But if you reward them, right, and they're getting performance reviews and they're getting more on purpose by implementing these strategies, does it work?
Absolutely. The data continues to prove this out. Deloitte did a study. I want to say this one's a 2022 updated study. There's been a couple, but I believe their stat was purpose-centered companies are growing 3x faster than their definition of non-purpose centered companies. I'm still a geek at heart. So I have more research and data than anybody will ever want to see. But I will tell you, if you want to do some research, I would just point to 3 organizations. PwC.
Yep,
Has
Price
been doing a
Waterhouse.
lot. Deloitte, I'm going to give 4. Deloitte has done a lot. McKinsey did a lot of studies around purpose in 2021. And the 4th is Harvard Business Review. Ranjay Gulati is now one of the professors that he leads a podcast around integrating purpose into large enterprise.
Well, that's a really good sign, because I know personally from personal experience, HBS itself, Harvard Business School, tends to be very, show me the wealth for me and mine versus, and the shareholders versus creating purpose. So I love that conversation.
For me, it was when I started reading McKinsey's work. When I saw McKinsey had jumped on this bandwagon, I thought, okay, if McKinsey's there, that means it's real.
Holy mackerel. I have goosebumps. I just did not see this coming at all. Brent has a quick question for you, and he always likes to make sure, how diverse is your company, and how accessible is your platform?
So great question. Diverse company is a very small, because it's myself, my wife, my son, and we do have a few contractors that work with us. We did certify over 20 coaches that went through our program. I want to say about 5 of them would fall into the racial diversity, and I think about 40% were women of the certified coaches. How accessible is the program? We have made it very accessible. Again, we did start with SMB, went to enterprise, and we've only recently come back to build the tools that are more accessible for small organizations. I will suggest that for our business products, having 5 individuals in your company probably is the right small low end of the spectrum.
Wow. And you have just filled us with such great information along the way. And before I get into some of the intangible questions, I want to ask you, how did you fund this? Was it from your exit? Was it from your own wealth? Was bootstrapped, so to speak? Or do you have investors on board with Go Beyond?
No, we do not have investors. I did bootstrap it, and it was funded from the sale of my exit.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. And folks, that's another great reason to build one company in order to then create an organization that's even more meaningful for you and an even deeper, fuller expression of what.
Yeah, and I would say for us, more scalable.
And more
Because when I was
scalable.
running a professional service business, I could impact the client across the table from me. But in order to impact hundreds of thousands of individuals and maybe even millions, the reality is you have to leverage technology.
Absolutely. So tell us, how are you measuring success going forward? What is that going to look like? And we know you want to scale, you want to reach more companies, but clearly you are a data-driven man
We are.
and founder. What does success look like for you, Greg?
If I were to use one metric to be the ultimate form of success on the individual front, it's probably that a certain percentage of individuals are so confident in sharing their purpose, they're willing to put it on the back of their business card or at the bottom of their email. Clearly, for an organization, we would like organizations to lead on purpose and with purpose, to have purpose as the center of a critical part of their brand, their attraction. One of my partners recently helped a very large university integrate purpose into their recruiting pitch. So for us, it's really having organizations that say, we stand for something different and we are a force for good. And this is the particular area of good that we're a force for. And then for individuals, one metric could be that we really start to see purpose as a critical part of the resume. And what is that unique thing that we bring to the table that makes us special?
Well, the ripple effect too is the mental health.
No question.
And folks, I just listened to we have a U.S. congressman locally, is Seth Moulton, and he was very responsible for the new 988 number for the suicide hotline, right? And since they implemented the suicide hotline last July, they've had over 1,000% increase from the younger generation via text messages. It's huge. And what you're doing here is giving people the knowledge base and the how to understand what their purpose is so they can be noodling on it, thinking about it, and helping the company remove this veil of, just it's all about the money and
Right.
make it more of a company that has a higher purpose for being in the world other than meeting shareholder value.
I want to just share one thing since you mentioned that. So again, our tools are focused around workplace, purpose in the workplace.
Right.
One of our strategic partners does have a tool that is designed specifically for what you just discussed. It's measuring someone's, for lack of a better description, propensity to suicidal thoughts.
Right. And folks, look, we're in trouble right now in the mental health, and we want it to be so that purpose driven is just like anything else you go out to do. I'm going to get a manicure and I'm going to go do, purpose driven. I'm going to get a massage or a physical. I'm going to go see my mental health, therapist.
Right.
It all has to be on an even playing field because we are humans first and we deserve to have a positive human experience. I love this, something fierce. And then would you let folks know, other founders know, that when you're having the tough day, and not if, that it's you've mentioned, pick your hard.
Yeah.
With the startup life, when it's really hard and you're feeling inadequate and all of that, in spite of all your experiences, how do you shift your mental state? What's a good mindset hack that you use to help you get back into your groove again?
We've gotten to the point, my wife and I have gotten to the point, she's a health coach. We've gotten to the point where we really are fairly disciplined about two things. The first is our morning routine of just being mindful, and we use prayer and reading of the Bible. But we also then get to the gym 4 or 5 days a week, and having that those endorphins kick in from getting on the treadmill, exercising, doing our strength training. I personally enjoy swinging the golf club. So one of my mental stress reliefs is I tell my wife, I'm going to go hit some balls. My son had a particularly bad day the other day, and he said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Let's go to the driving range." And I said, "Oh, do you want to get into golf?" He goes, "No, I just wanted to hit something."
That is wonderful.
But I would say there's 3 other things in all seriousness. Number one, find a mentor. Make sure you have somebody that really invests in you and you invest in their life and build that relationship. Number 2, have a close group of peers. These are individuals typically that are probably in a similar workplace as you. May not be coworkers, but there are other entrepreneurs, other founders, maybe they're in other businesses that are similar to you. And then the third is, of course, be part of a larger community. Maybe you're not sharing as much to that larger community as you will, but you know that there are other individuals that are struggling with similar areas as you are.
That advice is so wonderful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Folks, we have learned so much today from Greg. Go beyond, go check it out. Go beyond.work. I have all the links in the show notes where you can connect with Greg and follow Go Beyond.work everywhere it glows, but also check out the wonderful Try It For Yourself link, and that's in the show notes, and you can see it up here on the screen, and receive 15% off when using promo code Ande15. Greg told you 5 team members or more, and you're good to go with this. And you want to get this culture happening, purpose culture happening now. Greg, any last words before I pop into the green room and wrap up this delicious conversation with you?
I just tell people, live your purpose and leave your mark. Go do what you do best.
Oh my gosh, everybody, you know what we have to do before Greg leaves. Stitch it. Say that one more time.
Live your purpose and leave your mark. That is part of my purpose. My purpose is to help creative leaders figure out how to leave their mark. And that's what I want to do to this world. And I believe that's what everyone else in their heart wants to do as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your wisdom and your beautiful new business. Go Beyond. We have a deeper understanding of your purpose in the world and how you help other companies and workplace folks have
Ande, it's
purpose.
been a pleasure.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, folks, did we learn so much today from Greg? And I personally, with all the data, I am feeling more enlivened and more excited about our wonderful for impact and purpose capitalistic society that we have. It's very exciting to have learned that. Let me share with you who's coming up next on the Startup Life Live show. On Tuesday, March 7th, we're chatting with the Fab FinTech founder, Ksenia Udina, and she's a chartered financial analyst, a mom, and the founder and CEO of UNest, an app that empowers parents to easily invest and save for their kids' future. Not only has Ksenia solved a problem for parents already burdened with student loan debt and not wanting that financial condition for their children, she has raised over $38 million from well-known VCs to build her fintech platform. And we want to know, how did she raise that? Because only 2% of VC money is going to female founders, and we're going to get all the scoop there. But just a little side fact, when the war in Ukraine broke out over a year ago, many of her team members were in Ukraine, and you'll love her story about how she got them out and to safety. So it's going to be a delicious conversation. And how do you know? Whenever I post a new show, you join the Startup Life Live Meetup group right there. Links are in the show notes, so you can scan that QR code right there. Oh my gosh. And for those who are tuning into the podcast, I'm so grateful for your time and listening. Be sure to subscribe and rate the podcast. Really helps us reach more founders that way. Oh my gosh, we've got everyone here in the comment section. Live your purpose, says Richard O., the podcaster himself, and Brent Manuel, wow, and Jonathan Sloan, great talk, Greg. And Jonathan, we love learning about you and how you added value to this everything. And yes, amazing conversation from Ruth and Catherine, the wife of all wives. Thank you for being such a great model for all of us. She's saying that was a great conversation today. All right, folks, until next time, as always, I really want you to tune in and remember this very important thing. Remember that you are braver than you believe, stronger, right there's a muscle, than you seem. And as we say here in Boston, you are wicked smarter than you think. You have got this. I believe in you, and I am cheering wildly for you. Please connect with me online. Stop by and say hi. I'm on all the social platforms. I'd love to hear how you're doing. Until next time, I'm wishing you a delicious day everywhere you glow. See you next time. Mwahs.